Have you ever thought to yourself, I want to be my best self? Maybe if you've done personal development work, spiritual growth, something along those lines, you've had this idea of living your best self. Or maybe you want to call it your most aligned self, your wholest self, whatever word you might like to use. I realized that there were more aspects of this idea of best self than I had originally really thought about. And I wanted to make a little video where we break some of this down, think about what it means to be in our best or most aligned self, and how the different aspects of that might actually conflict with each other sometimes. If you're new here, hi, my name is Avery, and I help justice-aligned, neurodivergent, and nerdy humans to cultivate ease and self-trust as we grow towards our emerging future. This video today was kind of inspired by some reading I was doing in a book about the Enneagram, which maybe I'll talk about a little bit later on the channel. But I got kind of hung up on this particular phrase, which was about the best self, or the idea of the best self. I've been thinking in some of my writing recently and just explorations about the idea of personal development or personal growth. I'm actually going to be writing about that some in my newsletter, so if you're not already subscribed and you're interested in this topic, link is below to sign up for that. But I was kind of thinking about this aspect of, what do we consider ourself at its most developed, aligned, growthy kind of place, and how that can be really kind of a shifting target, something that looks really different depending on how we look at it. In the book that I was reading, they were talking about the concept in the Enneagram, which you don't have to be familiar with for this video, but in case you are, they were talking about the concept of kind of the stress and growth arrows, the directions of integration or disintegration. People use different words for it, but the arrows back and forth is the main point. And they're talking about development and through your life course, and this idea of sometimes we're in our best self, sometimes we're in kind of a neutral place, and other times we're in our worst self. And they were saying, everybody has this experience. You probably are familiar with it. And they gave a list of just like a few words, and I don't have it right in front of me, so it's not a direct quote, but to paraphrase, best self was defined as when you're feeling generally good, you're feeling confident, you're having pride in yourself, you have energy. There may be a couple of other things. And it just immediately stood out to me. My little autistic brain was like, here are some details that I noticed, because sure, I get the basic sense of considering all those things together. But for me, I was like, I don't know. In fact, one of the things that I do remember was in that list was optimism, that you're feeling kind of optimistic about the world. And it was immediately apparent to me that there isn't necessarily always a correlation for me between my mood, my happiness, like do I feel good, my confidence, my sense of, pride to me speaks to like integrity, my sense of being in integrity, my sense of being in flow, my physical or mental energy, particularly as a neurodivergent person, a disabled person, often my energy doesn't necessarily match other things, as well as like, do I feel optimistic about the state of the world and the state of things? These things can track together, but they don't always. And I was also just reflecting on, over the course of my life, the ways in which this has shifted and changed, and especially the ways in which my mood and my emotions over the particularly past couple of years, have really not always been aligned with other things, especially with my sense of contribution or my sense of being integrity or in alignment with values, that as I've been deepening my spiritual journey, it's meant that I might do things like, for example, there was a point at which I changed up my mental health meds because I realized that my idea of what a correct mood would be, or what like the target would be for mood, kind of shifted as I had a different take on the world. And I realized that actually, like, I was okay with more fluctuation than I had been at earlier points in my life. And so I could be feeling really expansive about the universe, but still having this like up and down experience of moods. And because I am me, I tracked it out on a graph. So I'm not going to go through this in detail, but I thought I would show you this visual because one, it just shows you how extra I am, but also it was really interesting to do. And I don't know if I'd recommend this as an exercise, especially don't freehand a graph, y'all. This is like not 100% accurate. I did my best to get scale right and everything. And I am at times in my life, I am a data professional, so I know a lot about charts and graphs, but man, I am used to doing it on a computer. Nonetheless, I tried doing it with markers because I was having a lot of trouble doing this in my head, just thinking about these aspects of kind of like best self. And I also don't feel like best is a word that I would often use. I think I would tend to say things like most in alignment, most whole. But even those, it's like in alignment with what? Are we talking about in alignment with values, in alignment with the flow of the universe, in alignment with what other people need from you? So out of curiosity, I tracked 4 variables as best I could, just like intuitively based on my memory. And these are not, any of these lines could probably be broken out into like areas of life in different ways, and then they would become much more jagged. So it's kind of a normalized, a smoothed out line. For example, there are times where I'm feeling really happy in my relationships and really unhappy at work. And so I just kind of like smoothed that out as best as I could. Also, it doesn't really speak to the scope of different things. So like one of these lines, I'll tell you in a second, is about recognition. Another one is about contribution. And in some cases, the recognition is from a very small number of people, but it was meaningful to me. In other cases, it was a lot of people, but it wasn't as major. Sometimes my contribution was smaller or larger, etc. So again, like this is very much an averages situation. But what I thought would be interesting, and you could think about this in your own life, you could literally graph it if you'd like, but you could also just like, generally think about it. The 4 things I chose to explore, and again, I don't know how clearly you can see the colors on the video, but there's a light blue line for, this is like, I called it alignment with the universe. And admittedly, my definition of alignment with the universe kind of varies through the years, but I was thinking about things like when you're really in flow, when you're really kind of feeling like a sense, not necessarily knowing where you're going, because I think over time I become less attached to certainty and like a linear path, but that sense of like I'm in the right place at the right time. I feel confident about what I'm doing. I feel like things are flowing, opportunities are coming and going, like things just kind of feel flowy or aligned. That's the light blue. The green is recognition. So tangible things like receiving positive feedback, things like getting promotions or getting jobs, things like getting recognized in school, things like someone having a crush on me, whatever it is, like some sort of recognition that my value, as it were, kind of a capitalist bullshit thing, but from other people. The dark blue is mood, so just kind of how happy I was generally at that point in my life. And then, which if you were to break this down, it would be way more jagged, but the kind of average. And the purple is my sense of like how much I was contributing at that time. And again, the contributions have varied a lot. Sometimes this is like, I'm in a job and I'm doing a lot for a lot of people. Is it meaningful? I don't know, but like, I have a sense that I'm contributing to something. Sometimes it's things like loaning people money or giving to charity, or it might be like, I did include like values, I could have included that in alignment with the universe, but I kind of included in contribution how much I was like minimizing harm, or felt like I was really living in alignment with my values in a way that I was contributing to things being better. So that might be things that aren't as tangible, but like conversations with people, moving balls forward, etc. So that's the basic idea of what I decided to break down. And you could break it down for yourself in any way that you like. There might be lots of different things. I thought about tracking like my level of optimism about the external world. I decided not to on this graph, but I could have done that. And what I noticed was, it was kind of interesting. I mean, a lot of this was kind of like, I don't know if it's a meaningful correlation. But the thing that I noticed that did seem kind of interesting was, you can kind of see here that, so I started tracking this in 2000, so 23 and a half years ago, when I was 15, and decided not to bother including childhood here, but from when I was 15, and what you can see is that the mood, the blue, and the purple, which is, again, contribution, they basically track with each other. They correlate up to a certain point. This point happens to be when I graduated from law school, which was the graduate school I went through, and left school. So this is all school, and then work is beyond that. So it's interesting, one thing I noticed when looking at this is that my, chicken or egg, I don't know, but that at times when I felt like I was contributing, tended to correlate with a slightly better mood. Not always, like in here, it's kind of a little bit inverse. And then both of these things were like not that high. Like my sense of, am I contributing to anything meaningful, was a lot higher once I got into, adult life. My mood was also a lot higher once I got into adult life. And then the other two also track. So that was particularly interesting to see how, with some exceptions, there's an exception, that's a little bit of an exception, but generally, I noticed that my sense of like flow and alignment and energy and all of that tended to track with being recognized for things. And I think that makes a lot of sense if you think about being a teenager, you think about being in your early 20s, that sense of like, if people are approving of me, if I'm getting signs that I'm on the right track, that I'm doing well, then I feel more in flow. And then when I'm not, I might just feel not in flow. But also it could go either way. So like one meaningful moment for me was around 2001. I had a kind of what a Christian might call a come to Jesus moment, but like a very like spiritual connective moment at the ocean once, triple water sign, at the ocean, where I just like made this decision about how my life was going to be going forward, that led to me behaving in different ways that then led to people recognizing me. So it could be either way. But the same thing happens. Like you get to this point, and then right here, the two lines split. So, this was the one that was tracking together. You can see this one and this one split, and then these were tracking together and they split again. So there was this moment when I graduated in 2009. You may recall, if you were around then, the economy was not so great. I had this sense of linear motion, this sense of, and I was really into like self-development and progress and trying to be my best self in that whole period. And I imagined this linear trajectory. I went to law school for human rights. I thought, I'm gonna have a career in that. I'm gonna be able to help people. It's gonna be great. I'm gonna love it. Everything's gonna be good. And then I had this like rude awakening of, there are no jobs for you. Doesn't matter how much you've been recognized up here in law school. Doesn't matter how many awards you have. Doesn't matter how many people think you're great at being a student. You're not gonna get a job. So everything kind of dropped off for a moment there. But then, when I did, eventually after a year and a half, I did get a full-time job. And, what I see here is that the recognition and the contribution start to track together. offering things in my job and those things get recognized, but it doesn't necessarily affect my sense of alignment or mood, because this is not a time where my work was all that meaningful to me, where it was very well aligned. We talk about things like soul purpose and, you know, having a job that's aligned with your passion. We talk about that for neurodivergence, how important it is. It's like it was not very aligned here, and so these two kind of split. And then down here in the bottom, 2012 to today, everything kind of tracks together a little bit for a moment, and it's all pretty much the same. And then, you know, we're going along, and we're up high. So this is a point at which that 2014 is when I got a job that first full-time job that like I really felt good and recognized, and I was there for 7 years. Although there was totally some up and down at the beginning, it was very spiky, like nearly got fired twice, and then was like super fucking recognized by everybody there. And so it's like I'm up here, I'm high. You know, this is the point, by the way, the mood goes bloop. That's when I got on antidepressants. So, you know, chemically, my mood was pretty good. But, you know, it did take a big dip when I lost a job and then I got a new job. And in here, it's like everything's pretty high. I'm doing pretty well. So this is sort of like traditional-ish career success, part of my path. You know, it was nonprofit, but it was still getting more and more responsibility, having lots of people be like, oh my gosh, I like your work. It was also a period in which I was doing a lot of speaking as a queer and trans activist. I was feeling like I was contributing to something bigger. I started a major relationship in my life in here. I had another relationship in here. So like everything's kind of going do along your more or less typical path. And then this is where I started doing tarot astrology, and this is where I started doing kind of spiritual exploration and working with my intuition. And this is where my mood, like my happiness, is kind of going down because my disabilities are getting worse. I'm exhausted at work. I'm not feeling like I'm contributing as meaningfully, even though I have the contribution up here, because in reality, I'm helping a lot of people. I didn't feel good about it. Like, I didn't feel super meaningful about it. I was helping, like, several people pretty significantly financially, and I was giving more money to causes, and I was more in integrity in general. All of that stuff is great, but I also just, my life was, I was getting tireder and tireder and tireder. I was burning out along here. But as I was doing spiritual development, my alignment with the universe is going up. Slowly, and then also slowly, my recognition is going down. So this is when these two cross. They've been tracking with each other the whole time, and then they kind of cross. And, you know, the recognition that I'm getting from others is less because my scope is getting narrower, because I'm doing more private stuff, because I'm, you know, actually pulling back intentionally from some of the visible contributions that I'm making. And so I'm not, I would say, as recognized in that way, but I'm feeling more and more at ease with myself and in flow. And eventually I think that is what allows my experience to improve. And that is what allows some of these really synchronous moments that happened in this area. Even though my mood is kind of like bloop, 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 it's up and down, it's very jagged compared to the other lines. But it was interesting to see the way that happened. And then finally, the last couple of big things, recent years. So you can see now the lines are all the fuck over the place. They go this way and that way, and they cross each other, and they don't make a lot of sense. That's when I quit my job. So 2021, that's where I quit my full-time career. I started this business and had, so many ups and downs in recent years. There's a little uptick when I figured out ADHD, I figured out autism, I figured out my chronic fatigue. And so there's, if we had tracked optimism, my optimism would have been high here. I'm a little bit happier. but my ability to contribute has gone way down because it's like, I can be as aligned as I want and hear and, I would love to contribute and to help people, but it's like if I'm not working with anyone, if I'm still working on building my business, if I'm still, there's a little bit of contribution in the sense of my content, but like people aren't finding it because of the way algorithms work. And so I think that can be like for a lot of people a very frustrating experience of like, I'm here to contribute. Who wants me to contribute to them? I could feel more in integrity, but it was also the pandemic. It still is a pandemic for me. It really is still a pandemic. I'm still locked down. I have been for several years, and I can't be as interdependent as I want to be. Right? My values in here really shifted to wanting more relationship, more interdependence, and I can't do it. So ultimately, it's like my contribution goes down, not because I want it to, but just because my ability to contribute goes down. My recognition goes way down here, and yet continue to feel fairly aligned, and my mood to be pretty high. There was a moment where I remember being in the car. I was driving to Northwest Terror Symposium, which is like one time that I did something pretty significant in this pandemic. I had an opportunity to present there. I was really excited about it. It went great. The weekend went great. I was super careful, wore an N95 the whole time, didn't even go to classes mostly because I was afraid to. And I'm like driving there, and I've also recently stopped my antidepressants, which is why this mood goes way down. But I stopped my antidepressants, and I remember being in the car, and I'm like bawling, but I'm also feeling the most connected to spirit, the most like just things feel in flow again for the first time in months, and it's feeling great. And it's like these lines are totally disconnected, where if you consider your best self as being shown by tangible recognition, it's not very high here. If you think about it as contribution, I'm not doing a whole lot for others at this moment, but I feel really aligned. There's a little up when I did my first human design readings, where it was like the first time that folks were really signing up for something that I was selling. A couple of my first couple of paying recurring clients for neuroemergent guidance booked with me. So I had this sense of like, yes, the universe is saying, you're on the right path, you're on the right track, even though your health is not doing great. I got COVID at Northwest Terror Symposium, despite all my precautions. My health is suddenly in the toilet again. I'm crying all the time. I'm dealing with depression for the first time in however many years that is, 10 years. All of this is happening. And yet, if you think of best self as, relating to the sense of alignment, to the sense of flow, like we're doing pretty well here. And then we go bloop again. Because long COVID starts to take its toll, I'm less able to contribute or to do things, even though I could have continued to ride that wave. I honestly couldn't show up, right? Y'all may remember if you've been here for a while. Couldn't show up, couldn't do much at all, couldn't even write, couldn't breathe. Mood goes way all the way down here until the point that I realized, surprise, as much as I'm not a huge fan of the medical model with these things, like I fall into PMDD and realizing that and getting medication for that, it's like, yet another little blue, blue, blue. And then these like couple of spikes in here when I spent time at home. I was just recently home for 3 months, just got back. Home as in like family of origin home, which felt really good unexpectedly, but in here there's all sorts of ups and downs, and I think that's why I've been thinking about this so much. So that was like a little like journey that maybe you didn't necessarily through my personal context, but I thought it made an interesting example of that being in your quote unquote best self is pretty complicated. And when you think about spiritual development, personal growth, I've shifted very much from a linear model and the idea of a linear sort of growth, and shifted away from focusing solely on these tangible things. And so when that blue line of alignment continues and the tangible things drops off, there's a lot of me that says, no, I'm still like, I'm living my best self. I feel good about that. But also, when over time that alignment stays high, but everything else falls down, there's a point at which, as much as it's not about like traditional tangible recognition, there's a point at which you want to be living in exchange with other people. You want to be contributing. You want to be receiving. You want to be having that interaction. And your mood, it turns out, will suffer if you're not exchanging with people, if you're not with people, which is what this pandemic has meant for me. And I think that there are times earlier in my life when I might have judged that. And I'm sure that there are folks who are in that experience now where it feels like when obvious synchronicities are happening, when you're getting positive results, when things are feeling really good and you're like, yes, I'm on my track, I'm doing great. And then when they're not, it's like, well, but it's so much less linear than that. And it is a spiral. Life is very much a spiral. That's the pattern, right? It goes around and around and around. And you come back to the same place, but you come back at a different point. So like if this is the point you hit, you hit it once here and you come around and now you hit here. So it's not that you haven't grown and learned things. It's not that, when my mood went way the fuck down at this point, I had way more tools than what it did at this point. At this point, the only thing I knew how to do was go to a psychologist and say, I need some sort of medicine. At this point, I have a lot more tools. But it still came around eventually to me saying, you know what, I think I do need some kind of medicine. And that's okay. And there's nothing wrong with that. And now that's one of many tools in my toolkit. And so I experience it differently. And the spiritual tools and the, kind of metaphysical tools that I work with, they felt different at different points during this very jagged part where everything's kind of going up and down and up and down. And I don't think anymore that, it's really easy to turn in the kind of like linear progress of I want promotions and money and success and recognition and fame or whatever it is for you. It's very easy to say, okay, I recognize those as like kind of being capitalist bullshit, and then to end up almost in like another layer of capitalist bullshit that's less obvious, where it's like, I want to be the most developed, I want to be the most spiritual, I want to be living in a beautiful aligned flow all the time, and I want to be doing my practices, and I want to be, like moving with change, and I want to be really graceful about that. And it's like, I think we all can get, more and more of that, but the reality of it is that you're going to have times where things just feel like utter shit. You're going to have times where there's no way to be optimistic. You're going to have times where you are doing well in one area and things are really rough in another area. And so I think the goal for me is less about, how can I be in my best self as often as possible, knowing that that's clearly multivalent and can have pieces that are very different at different times. But how can I keep returning, and how can I keep learning in this process, and how can I keep experimenting and growing, and how can I find ways? I think it's very healthy that like I reached a point at which my sense of contribution didn't always have to match my mood. My sense of recognition didn't always have to match my sense of alignment. I can be in a period where nobody sees what I'm doing and I still feel very aligned. I think that that's very healthy. And that can be a great place to get to. Having these lines switch directions can actually be like a sign of an interesting kind of growth. Because growth is not linear towards a particular single goal. That's the capitalism thing, is it's all growth towards profit, 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 profit. exploitation of resources is really what's happening there. But actually, growth contains lots of death. Growth contains, if you think about growing plants, it's like other plants have to die for a plant to succeed. A plant itself has to drop leaves and drop fruit and drop things, right? There's little death, there's lots of death within the whole ecosystem of the person growing, and then within the whole ecosystem of the community growing. There's always going to be stumbles, setbacks. And I think that that's like something that is pretty obvious in your brain, but it's hard to embody. So I don't know, I hope that this like little take here maybe helped one person to think a little bit about, you know, how you view your own spiritual development, your growth journey, how you judge yourself, where you are, and how you set goals. And just remembering that it can be returning, and it can be coming back to some kind of equilibrium, rather than expecting that you're always going to be going towards something greater and greater. If you feel like that's your goal, you might want to ask yourself questions about where that comes from and what voices maybe you're listening to in spiritual communities, in metaphysical communities that are embodying that kind of energy, and whether that's healthy for you. I'm not going to say that it's not. It's up to you to decide, but I think it can be a really meaningful thing to question. Okay, I hope you enjoyed this video. Of course, I'm always chatting about topics like this, about spirituality, metaphysics, about neurodivergence, all sorts of things. And I know this is a point where most people would tell you to like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. You can do that if you like, but I also want to recommend that you check out my newsletter below, because I do a lot of writing. I have free resources. I have a website. I have lots of things. And my newsletter is the best place to find out about what's coming. And, you know, if you're needing support further in this area, you know, get on there and check it out. And if you want to work with me, I have lots of offerings, things on the website that is also below. And so I would love to see you there, and I'll let you know when I have new YouTube videos as well. Leave a comment if you have thoughts on this, your own take on sort of growth, development, best self, how that lands for you and how that's changed for you over time. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Otherwise, I will see you in the next video.